Now call this regular meeting of the Jacksonville City Council to order. I want to welcome everyone who's in attendance tonight and also those who will be watching the meeting on G10 television network, station. To begin with, we're going to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Dr. Angela Washington, and followed by the invocation by our city attorney.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we pause again. We pause again to give you thanks. Thanks for this day that you have given to each of us. Thanks for our city. And thanks for our community that we are able to live and to work in. We especially remember this evening our military personnel who are serving here and those serving around the world, many in very, very dangerous places. Keep them safe and bless their anxious families. And tonight we especially pray for our mayor and our council as they continue searching for a new city manager. Give them guidance, give them direction, give them insight. That the person that you would have them to call to be our city manager, that they will perceive that and will act upon it. And that that person will be able to face the future with the challenges that we know we'll have and also the possibilities that we'll know we'll have. All this we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Please be seated. Council, we've had time to study the agenda for tonight's meeting, and there was one additional addendum to the.
That is number 11. That the attachment is one of the
Number
capital.
11,
Yes,
for
sir.
item number 11, that's the one you just got. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion, have a second by Mr. Jackson. Is that you? Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Next, we have our first section of public comment for this evening, and right now I have no one signed up for public comment, but I would ask if there's anyone present that wishes to speak, please indicate so by raising your hand. I see no one, so we're going to move on to the adoption of the minutes and the consent items. There's 9 consent items on the agenda tonight, and the minutes for the meetings are the May 23rd, 2022 regular meeting, the June 7th, 2022 workshop meeting, the June 21st organizational meeting, and the July 12th, 2022 special meeting. Motion, please.
Move adoption of the minutes and consent items.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Okay. So that brings us to our first item tonight, and this is agenda item number 10 on the non-consent. This is Economic Development Administration EDA grant. This is for the this is the agreement for the visitor center. Let me pull this up real quick, and Anthony Prinz will be presenting this item. Anthony.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. As the Mayor said, I want to talk to you a little bit about a grant opportunity that we have if we choose to accept it, and that, of course, is related to the Visitor Center project. Just a short history lesson before we talk about the grant itself. In 2018, we had a concept that's shown on the left-hand side. It was partially designed. We put it out to bid, and had some challenges with that. And it was intended to be constructed on a pad that was installed as part of the Jacksonville landing project itself. So to orient you to the map here, the red area where it was intended to be constructed is just to the left of the boat ramps, which are off the screen to the right. And then to the left, underneath the renderings, would be the old Exxon Station. About 2,700 square feet with, what I would call the basic amenities of a visitor center, some offices, restrooms. And as I mentioned, there were challenges at that time. The main challenge is that we advertised it twice and only received one bid. It says the low bid there, but it was really the only bid. And that came back at about $70,000 more than the budget, which was pretty significantly more than the engineer's estimate as well. So at that time, we basically put the project down because it wasn't affordable and we moved on to other things. But prior to applying for this grant, we looked at the plans again just to see kind of what happened and why it ended up being so expensive with the bids. What we found is that there were some holes in the design. Specifications weren't fully complete. And if you see there on the top right-hand side, when there are notes like this on the plan that says to be selected by owner, and then on the bottom there, screening to be provided if required, to me that indicates that we didn't go through the full development review process and put a full set of plans together so that a contractor can put together a good bid. There were also challenges with the location and the footprint. So as you probably saw, it's a very confined area. So the visitor center was limited to that square footage. Around 2020, was it, John? Yes. The council had an option to purchase the Exxon Station, and of course that happened. It's the area shown in yellow, and the good thing about that is it creates a lot more flexibility than the prior site as far as constructability, flexibility with design, etc. It also has a significant amount of impervious surface, which is great when we go to do the design because we don't have to treat all of that. So it was in December of last year that we got authorization from council to apply for this grant, and the application followed the goals of the program itself, and that the intent was to strengthen our travel and tourism industry here in Jacksonville. And to do that, the intent of the grant was to create a home base for the Tourism Development Authority, as well as potentially some of our other partners. At the time, it was identified that the Sports Commission might be one of those partners to join in with us. Ultimately, to promote tourism and increase our market capture, which are two very big goals of the TDA. Improve resiliency, which seems a little bit odd, but the intent there was to be able to help the hospitality industry recover from various events like hurricanes or other natural disasters. After Florence, we found that supporting those industries, supporting those businesses was just as important as getting people in to do the repair work on the power infrastructure and begin the cleanup, because those folks had to have a place to stay. And so in order to support them, we had to support the tourism industry as well. We took lots of phone calls. We ran lots of interference for them to start back up. And also potentially a space to host events. This isn't for like military balls or anything like that. This is more along the lines of packet pickup type of event for all of our races, or to have an orientation for the various fishing tournaments. So administrative space, both indoor and outdoor, in order to support those types of activities. The concept that we put in the application was very broad, and it included all the things that you see here on the screen. But again, it was intentionally broad so that it could provide us flexibility if we wanted to change gears, given the fact that since the prior concept, we had acquired the new property, which creates new opportunity and flexibility for implementation. One thing that was not in the original concept was an improvement to the gateway. And the intent there would be to bring it up to that same quality that you've seen out on Piney Green and on Marine Boulevard with all the new gateway signs. proposed budget, this is basically what would be available if we were to accept the grant. So a total of 1.1 million, 750 of that coming from EDA, 350 coming from Onslow County. EDA money has a 4-year timeline on it, okay? So it has to be spent within 4 years. And Onslow County has a 1-year timeline on it. So if we choose to move forward, we're gonna have to figure out how to do that quickly. If not, we have to figure out how to extend the timeline on that money. But then there are also other potential partners, the Tourism Development Authority being one, and there may be others out there that we want to consider as well, depending on what the cost of the project ends up being. So the request before council tonight is first to consider the EDA Grant Award. And if you see favorably on that, that you consider the budget amendment and the CIP amendment that would give us budget authority to start moving forward. Now, the intent there would be to further explore the scope of what we're trying to accomplish with this, also potentially to identify those partners who we may want to involve. And whether it's tonight or whether it's at a future date, we'd really like to get some guidance from you on that.
Anthony, who did the original design on the building?
Paul Connor from Richlands, he did the original design, and he had an engineer that did the electrical and the mechanical, so he sub pieces out of it. But again, it really wasn't to a state for a normal project that we would put out to bid.
Right, so are we going to, in this process, are we going to have to rebid the design?
We will have to go out for an RFP and figure out who, would be best to do the design if we choose to do a redesign.
And on the drawing, the concept drawing, it showed the public restrooms. I think there was some talk about one of our organizations occupying some office space there at one time.
There was talk about the sports commission maybe manning the facility, and I can tell you in conversation with Scott that having shared public restrooms and shared staff restrooms was a bit of a concern.
I can fully understand that, yeah. But, council questions?
Mr. Prince, if my understanding is correct, acceptance of this grant does not lock us into any particular detail of the existing plan. There is room for modification with the flexibility of this new location, correct?
Absolutely not. So really all it ties us to is the concept of a visitor center. Now, whether that be the one that we had before or whether that be one that we come up with for the new site, it'll be applicable for sure.
Thank you. Anybody else? Questions? All right. Thank you, Anthony.
Yes, sir.
All right, they're seeking permission to authorize the interim city manager to enter into this agreement on behalf of the city, consider accompanying legislative budget amendment to appropriate EDA and county funds. One more question on the county funds there. When does that kick in? I mean, what's contingent on that being drawn down?
Fiscal 23 is really the only caveat on that money. They didn't earmark it for any particular purpose other than the visitor center, from what I recall.
Does your motion include redesign of the project?
That's what I was going to add, Mr. Bittner. We're looking for part of that motion. Of course, the mayor doesn't make the motions, but whoever makes that motion would be for staff to go back and to get a consultant and with an RFP and get a redesign to deal with some of the things that Anthony's already mentioned and so forth. Taking part of the monies from the county, because that has to be spent first, and utilizing that for that purpose. Now, y'all will be part, of course, of that whole process, but time is of the essence, and we need that guidance and that understanding that we'll move in that direction. Having said that, I think it's always important to realize once you accept a grant and you start moving in that direction, you're going to build a structure. So it may be within the $1.1 million, or I don't know what the future holds in this environment, in our economic environment, but there'll be a structure built. So just keep that in mind. But that's the kind of guidance we're looking for, Mr. Bittner and Mayor.
Well, I'd make the motion then to give authorization to the manager to accept the EDA grant and to initiate an RFP for redesign of the proposed structure.
Budget and CIP amendment also.
Yes.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Is there any further discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Anthony. Number 11 on the agenda for tonight, and I guess you're going to do this one too, right?
Unfortunately, I'm going to be with you again, sir, for number 11.
This is for MOUs for the Project Frontier Jacksonville Business Park. Anthony, go ahead and present that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Before Anthony presents, I think it's important for the public to understand that something that the council, I believe, understands, that Mr. Warden has stepped down from being your representative on the JOAD. He is no longer on that governing board, so the ethics law that we have talked so extensively about does not apply to him. And in fact, one of the consent items that y'all just approved was your annual allocation to JOAD, plus the allocation of the capital campaign that you made a commitment for over 5 years. This is the second year, I believe. But I wanted to clarify that. Mr. Warden is free to speak tonight.
Well, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mr. Prince.
Thank you, Mayor. So as you recall, I believe it was this past May that Ron presented to you the concept of Project Frontier. Of course, just like the roadway that serves the business park, that's where we intend to focus our efforts, is in this area highlighted in yellow. Part of it has been developed, and of course, as we all know, that's where our water treatment plant is as well. So the current scope, as we understand the direction from council last time, is to work with JOAD to seek grant money to develop a regional stormwater system for that property, and then also to extend New Frontier Way from where it ends at the water plant all the way over to Gum Branch Road. The intent with both of those is to seek other people's funds to help make that property more marketable and incentivize private development at some point in the future. There was also discussion of a shell building, that to be constructed by others, but the intent there, I believe, was to come back at a future date and to review those details after we've made progress on the infrastructure itself. So current status, we've been awarded 4 of the 5 grants that we intended to apply for. 4 of those require no local match. Most of that money comes to the city. A small bit of that money comes to JOAD because it has to go to a nonprofit. And that's one of the reasons why we have an MOU here, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Another grant we have verbal approval on, which is very positive, but we don't have all the information necessary to apply for that grant, and it also potentially requires a local match. So we will have to come back and talk to you about that one in the future. The good thing about that grant is it doesn't fund anything in the early phases of this project. So we wouldn't incur any expenses under that one grant until we award and start constructing the roadway extension itself. So we have plenty of time to apply for that grant. The survey work is complete, and Wally is working on the wetland permit extension for the property so that we can, help cut some time out of the project design by using what we already have approved. So here are the revenue sources. We got 5 different grants. You can see Jones Onslow is one of those grantors, and we're very appreciative of their support of the project. And then here are the expenses. So we would initiate with design, and we plan to contract with Tidewater Engineering on that. Then we have clearing, grading, stormwater, and then, of course, the road construction. The good thing here is that the revenue that we have coming in matches the opinion of probable cost that we have from Tidewater right now, so revenue matching expenses, which is a good thing. However, if something changes in the future, there are a few of those grant programs that we could potentially go back and ask for additional funds. But we're not going to be able to do that unless we can justify the need for that money. So next steps, depending on the action of council tonight, we'd love to award the design tomorrow, if at all possible. With design and permitting following on until about January of '23, we feel that that's going to take 4 to 6 months. Bid award in February, and then construction between March and December. So March is a critical date because the engineer advises us that we really need to be under construction early spring for this to not be potentially delayed by weather impacts. So the request tonight is that the council consider 2 MOUs, one between the city and JOED that creates kind of it's just a loose partnership on the Frontier project itself. And then there's a 3-party agreement that creates the arrangement between the city, or among the city, JOED, and Tidewater, so that JOED would pay Tidewater for the services rendered to design the project on behalf of the city. So was that clear? And of course, the third there would be to consider the budget amendment and the CIP amendment to give us budget authority to move forward. And that concludes the presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have about Project Frontier.
Council questions of Mr. Prince.
You said it's gonna loop the Gum Branch at some point, you said?
Yes,
Where was it gonna come out, the Gum Branch?
next to River of Life, well,
In
excuse
between
me,
where there's apartments and that, okay, that's what I,
the Old River Life Church.
yeah,
Yes.
okay, that's what I assumed, but I just wanna make sure.
It's not the ideal location, but we're stuck. Yeah, it'd been,
That light right there.
yeah, it would been nice to come out the light, but you've got a stormwater pond over on the apartment side, and it just cost prohibitive to try to get everything to line up.
Cause like, I was just thinking like, if there's trucks and stuff like that, cause it's gonna be kinda industrial, commercial type, just traffic and I guess hopefully everything goes one direction, not trying to go left going across Gum Branch. That'd be kind of a mess, I
It's
would think.
right in, right out right now, and that's
I'm assuming
probably
it'll
what
stay that way?
that's probably what
Okay.
it's gonna stay.
So just going, with that bottom left area, just continue straight out, is that right?
Well, the good thing is, and when this is all said and done, there's actually going to be 3 primary entrances to the project. One is the Gum Branch access that we were just talking about. 2 is going to be out here to Western at Williamsburg Parkway, and 3 will be out to Gum Branch at Williamsburg Parkway. And right now, there's a good amount of development activity that's generating in this area right now, and we're looking for ways to partner with them to create a traffic signal at that intersection. So, I mean, even though the access on Gum Branch is not going to be ideal, we will have excellent access to the property, that's for sure.
Okay.
Natural traffic flow there would create more of an in than an out for the time being until you see more development down the road. With more development and interest in the property, another signal might be added.
Other questions? Thank you, Anthony. Council, you've been asked to consider those MOUs that are attached on this item and the CIP amendment and budget amendment to advance Project Frontier. We have a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the 2 attached memorandums of understanding, the budget and the CIP amendments.
Second.
A motion and second. Any further discussion?
I'd just like to comment and compliment the staff for following through on getting these grants. This project demonstrates that we're going to continue making progress, possibly creating jobs, and with the grant money, we're doing this with minimum cost to the taxpayers. So kudos to the staff for making this possible.
It wasn't just the staff, it was also the Mark Sutherland with JOED, so it was a combination, but the staff certainly been a big help.
I'm including them.
Good collaborative effort. Any other? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Brings us to agenda item number 12, if I can get to it. Agenda item 12 is ordinance directing the code enforcement official and neighborhood improvement services department to demolish and remove the dwelling at 109 Annie Avenue. Jason Larson, from our chief zoning and code enforcement officer, will be presenting this item. Jason.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. This evening, we bring you a case for demolition at 109 Annie Avenue. This has been on the code enforcement books for a while. When I looked back at the case files, what we had on file was the earliest one we had on file was back in 2014. Ms. Gray, the former CD director, had sent out a voluntary demolition request to Mr. Pickett, who denied the request and advised that he would do demolition on his own. So since 2014 to today, there have been several different building permits to have it demolished voluntarily on his own. It just couldn't quite seem to have it taken care of. This is back in 2021 of March. This is the condition of the home. You can see the roof is not weather tight. The structure itself is not weather tight. This was back in March. In March, our code administrator, Danny Bryan, did an inspection of the home, of the interior. You can see here there's no flooring in the majority of the home. Some of the drywall has been removed. There's no plumbing. This house more than meets the violation of an inhabitable dwelling. So that's why code enforcement is involved. Fortunately, nobody's lived in this house for quite a while, but it's definitely some slum and blight and needs to be either repaired or demolished. Since then, permits have been acquired, but no work had really been done. So in February of this year, we had a hearing with Mr. Pickett, who's actually here today. We had a discussion on the things that needed to be done. You can see through the agenda several times, voluntary demolition by the city has been offered and declined. And for reasons of his own, Mr. Pickett has decided to have his family have hands-on demolition of this structure, which is totally his right to do so. So we had a hearing, and that's why we're here today. We had a timeline for that to be completed by today. I'm going to scroll through some photos for you. This is in February of this year. We had it tarped to try to save some interior. Of course, that didn't work. And then here's one in March. He had started demolition on the front, and you can see that the roof is collapsing. It's just more in a deteriorated state. Here is a photo in April. Some more demolition had been done, and of course, more deteriorated state. This is May, where most of the roof has been taken, but the interior drywall insulation is still in the building, or in the dwelling. So again, here we are in June. Not much had been done. Mr. Carter and I had spoken to Mr. Pickett, offering voluntary demolition once again. And what he agreed to was city staff from the streets department sending out a trailer for Mr. Pickett to deposit the demolition materials into. So we've been doing that for the last several weeks, providing a trailer for him to empty in the construction. And this is July 6th. He had gotten some more done. So since 14, not much has happened, but since February, and we met during our hearing, he's actually gotten a lot accomplished. This photo was taken today. So this is all that remains of the structure. Mr. Pickett has done a very good job of getting most of what he can taken down. So again, this is all that remains. This was of this afternoon at about 1:30. These were taken. So there's some foundation. There's a crawl space. I believe that structure is the remains of a bathtub. So the reason we're here today, if I'm wrong, Mr. Carter can correct me, but I think Mr. Pickett has done a great job of getting it to this point, but because of the history, and we just want a finalization of all the debris, removed. We decided to continue with bringing this to your attention this evening. Mr. Pickett is here to speak if he needs to. I didn't bring Danny Bryan because I think we can see that it's definitely a minimum housing issue and uninhabitable. But we still need the rest of the debris to be taken care of. And I think Mr. Pickett, if I'm wrong, Mr. Pickett has every intention to continue the demolition by himself. And we're requesting to possibly table this case until the next council meeting.
Let's see if Mr. Pickett wants to speak.
If there's no questions, I would like to ask if Mr. Pickett would like to speak, if that's appropriate.
That's fine.
Mr. Pickett?
Like you said, there's a personal reason.
You need to come
Mr.
up,
Pickett.
Mr. Pickett.
So they can get you on the mic.
Yes, there's a personal reason we wants to tear it down, me and my brother. It was 17 of us living in that house, and I'm emotionally attached to it, me and my family, so we're demolishing it. And we would like to continue to do that. You see where we started at and where we are today. So we would like to remain and continue the demolition of the home. And again, it's a personal thing with me and my brother. Again, it was 17 of us, lived in that home, so we're in the process of doing so.
Mr. Pickett, do you think you can finish before August 16th? That's the next regular council meeting. Could you have everything down to the grass, to the dirt, and that nearly,
August 16th?
yeah, about 28 days from now. The day's the 19th, it'll be August 16th,
If the city can provide us
the trailer.
with the trailer, it won't be a problem.
Now, you're dealing with blocks and so forth, but that's not gonna be a problem for y'all to get all that.
No, we'll take care of it. You say about a 6?
The 16th.
Oh, yeah.
16th, August,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
28 days, just about a month from now.
Yeah, we'll have it taken care of.
That is enough time, correct?
Yeah, that's enough time.
We've been impressed, as you can
Right.
see, Mayor and Council, from the other picture, July 6th to today, which is, 13 days or whatever. Significant progress has been made. We have tried to work with Mr. Pickett because he has a very personal, he and his family, connection to the property and did not want to take advantage of the city taking it down at no charge because of that personal connection. What I would suggest is that the mayor and council would just continue this matter to your August 16th agenda. And if Mr. Pickett completes it and gets it down to the dirt by that date, we will just dismiss this matter and won't come back before you. Or if it's on the agenda, we can just say, take it off mayor and council. If not, then we'll let the mayor and council address it. But we have worked very, very hard to get to this point.
I have a question. Mr. Pickett had indicated that he and his family foresee right now no issues with tearing down the foundation and removing. However, when it comes to the cement blocks, the cinder blocks, if they do not have the appropriate equipment, is there anything that the city can offer them, or is everything totally up to them to use their own resources to remove the debris?
No, ma'am. The city from day one has offered to them the same program we offer to others. We'll come, we'll take it, we'll haul it off. There will be no charge to you. We used to have to sign certain documents and so forth. But as Mr. Pickett's indicated, because of their personal connection, they've not wanted to take advantage of that. Again,
No, that's not my question. My question is, like, if they have trouble, let's say, dismantling the cinder blocks, could they call the city and say, we need a piece of equipment, a sledgehammer or something to help expedite the service? If he and his family did that, would those services be available?
we will make services available if he needs them. But again, we'll ask mayor and council to put on your August 16th. And again, you look at the situation then, it may totally be down to the dirt and grass, and that's what we hope. And Mr. Pickle will testify, I think, to this, that we've made trailers available 2 and 3 times a week. And that's just our people, because you'll have the rent the trailer, and I told him anytime that trailer left there not full, he wouldn't get it back. And I have to say, he has gotten it back every time. So we've worked together so far.
So we just want to defer this until the 16th.
Yes, sir.
Move we table the ordinance until the next meeting.
Second.
Thank you, sir. We'll be.
Thank you, Mr. Pickett. Thank you. Oh, a motion to table, okay. Do we need a vote on that?
Yes, since you got a motion in a second, let's go ahead and get a
Motion
vote.
and second.
To the
All those in
16th.
favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Tabled until the 16th of August. Thank you. That brings us to agenda item number 13 for tonight, and this is a public hearing for the Jacksonville Take 5 LLC. It's a 1.35 acre lot over on, I think it's Western Boulevard. And Mr. Massey, our interim city manager, will be presenting this item.
Mayor and Council, on behalf of Jacksonville Take 5 LLC, Tidewater Associates has submitted a petition for an annexation of a 1.35 acre tract that is contiguous to the current city limit boundaries. The property is located at 2475 Western Boulevard, adjacent to First Citizens Bank and Shilsky Clinic, and across the street from the Publix complex, Gateway Marketplace. The developer proposes to build 2 businesses, a drive-through oil change service and a drive-through restaurant. The 5-year financial analysis shows a positive cash flow of approximately $19,500. Staff recommends that council adopt the annexation ordinance as presented.
Questions of Mr. Massey?
I have one, Mr. Massey. What's the situation with street maintenance around that lot? Will that remain as it is, or will the city
Yes,
annexation
it
change?
does. It will not change that. There's some sections that are maintained by the city and some sections are still in private ownership because the owner did not request the city to maintain it and the city did not accept it. So
Thank you, sir.
it didn't change. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to open, recess the regular council meeting, open a public hearing on this matter. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this particular issue? Please indicate by raising your hand. No takers. I'm going to close the public hearing. Council, you've been asked to consider the annexation ordinance.
Mayor Phillips, I make the motion that the staff recommends that the annexation ordinance be accepted as presented.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay. Item number 14 is a public hearing. It's a legislative hearing on a map amendment for zoning of parcels along Halltown Road to residential single-family RSF 7 and residential multifamily high-density RMF HD. Jeremy Smith will be presenting this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Framing this a little different, this is a zoning of parcels. If you will recall, in April of this year, City Council annexed several properties in this area along Halltown Road, part of a voluntary annexation that was not, at the time, in the city's jurisdiction, not in the ETJ, so it remains unzoned to this day, so the city has a responsibility to zone the property. We waited to bring this to the City Council because of some map parcel recombinations and a request from the property owner. The request for the 168 acres is for combining the several tracts into 2 parcels. One parcel is 114 acres, and the other is 54 acres. This is the existing zoning in the area. Notice the Patriot Park Phase 1 to the south, Highland Crossing at the corner of Piney Green and Halltown Road, just to give you a location. The proposal is to rezone the larger tract to zone the larger tract to residential single-family 7 and the smaller to residential multifamily high density. Council or staff took this to planning board last week, and staff along with the planning board are recommending approval of this request, accepting the evaluation found in the staff report, and that findings of fact A through J would be found in the affirmative if staff is directed to add these properties to the CAMA future land use plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions the council may have. The applicants, surveyor, Tidewater and Associates is also in attendance if you have any questions of them. Thank you.
Council, any questions of Jeremy or the Tidewater rep? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This time, I'm going to recess the regular council meeting and open up the public hearing on this matter. Is there anyone that present wishes to speak to this issue? Please indicate by raising your hand. Yes, sir. If you would come forward to the podium. If you would, please state your name.
My name is Ishwar Gopichan, resident of Onslow County for the last 26 years. Good evening, City Council. Just wanted to kind of look at this map, and we received a letter from the Planning Department.
Could you remove your mask
I
just
sure will.
briefly? Thank you.
I don't have any COVID, so
Okay.
I'm vaccinated. Just want to share, based on what's being asked, is an amendment on the proposed zoning of tracts of land along Halltown Road. If you notice, where's the tracts of land? It's just a small yellow part there, which looks almost like a driveway. It's an unoccupied property that I think the developers are planning to use that as a driveway, one on Halltown and one on Piney Green. The biggest problem you have is the developer, or the one who's helping develop, has a name, if I may remember right, there was a typo in your letter, and it is actually being requested to build 800 houses, single-family homes and multifamily homes. The problem is they did not mention the multifamily home, how many stories it will be. I have 5 questions for the council and for the planning board, and I'll make it and keep it simple. My first question is, where is the wetlands map? Are you showing to the city council? Has the planning board ever looked at the map of wetlands around area, or that's overlying that area there? Where is the flood zone map? Before you make the decision for the city to modify the zoning requirement. Number 3, I asked a question about the vertical height of the apartments. The only reason I ask, if you look through that area, if I may share the map with everybody. Piney Green, Halltown. Camp Leisure is here. A lot of planes pass through this area here. What's the height? They are pretty low. So the question is, how high will this building, RMF, be developing? 5 stories, 4 stories. We've seen how many stories in Commons and in Carolina Forest, those multifamily homes are. They're apartments, literally. We just want to call your attention to that.
If it's in the flight overlay zone, it's
Let's give you 5 and I will answer. Go
Yes.
ahead, Dr.
4th question, is it going to be sewer or septic? Up to now, the whole of this part here, which was previously annexed as an ETJ, had been withdrawn because there is no sewer allocation. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not the planning manager. I don't know anything. I'm just a doctor who deals with kids. But just to let you know, I mean, this is a whole community here, Highland Forest. This one is city. This one has been annexed, has been an ETJ before. There was notes that the ETJ was removed because they could not provide sewer allocation. So all of these houses here are septic. You're going to build 800 houses here, septic or sewer. Reason you want sewer is because of this and this attachment to the city. Correct? Okay. Last question. Patriots Park. Has anybody been to the site of the developer? What's the name of the developer again?
Ellis Development.
Ellis Development or Ellis Developments?
That's, it was
On your
Ellis-
letter, there's a typo or there's an error. There's a real legal flaw on an error on the document itself. Go to ellisdevelopments.com. Look at the site that says Patriots Park. If I may, I cannot look in the computer, but I will have a picture. They have already shown pictures of what the site is going to look like, what they're going to build, where they're going to put wetlands, where they're going to put clear water. If I may just, pardon, I beg your indulgence. Jacksonville Patriot Park. Patriot Park, located in Jacksonville, North Carolina, is planned for more than 800 residential homes near the East Coast home of the U.S. Marine Corps. The project will include a pool and clubhouse and other outdoor recreational amenities that preserve the existing natural features of the land. On their map, as shown, they have areas that are marked as follows: preserve green space, preserve wetlands, stormwater pond. As I said, this is still in the process of being zoned. I'd like to leave it at that. I'd like to leave it to the City Council to dig a little more deeper to see what is the intent and how are you going to produce this, develop this property for it to be environmentally safe and to protect the interests of the neighbors around it. There's going to be runoff, there's going to be overflow, there's going to be flooding. Think about it. My house is just a small one, but my property adjoins here. Half of it has trees still. If they're going to bulldoze all of this, look at the risk. Look at development. What assurance do we have from the developer that not all of these trees are going to be ripped off? As far as zoning is concerned, it is a decision the planning presents to the City Council for City Council to decide. From a money standpoint, it's a plus. From a tax standpoint, it's a plus. What are the taxes? Also county or city and county? We only pay county taxes right now. Don't you think the people who come here will be complaining, how come their neighbors are paying only county taxes? And now they're going to pay city and county, except for the multifamily, which is my expectation, it's going to be apartments. People are going to pay rent. But is the landowner going to pay city and county taxes? So I just like to present that as basically a member of the community, and as I said, the decision falls on the council with the proper information provided by the planning department. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Carter?
Thank you. Dr. Govachon, let me address some of your questions. You can
Sure.
go ahead
You
and
can address the whole body to that.
Yeah, I will. Go ahead. Number one, all the issue before the council tonight is the zoning. The RSF means residential single family. The RMF is residential multifamily. You're correct there. As far as getting into floodplains, as far as getting into wetlands, that would be addressed at the time that the developer came in with some site plans. That is not before the council tonight, and to my knowledge, staff has not got that, but that will have to be addressed. You're exactly right. That's up front. The height of the buildings. I do not know if this is in the flight overlay zone. My folks are telling me it is not.
It is not. The maximum height of the RMF HD zone
Go ahead, Ryan.
is 56 feet per our Unified Development Ordinance. So that's the maximum that the buildings could be.
And as you're correct, I think you understood, this will be handled by city sewer. The city of Jacksonville many years ago, along with NWASA, put a major sewer line that runs down Piney Green Road that actually carries the sewer out to Camp Lejeune, to their treatment plant. And these homes and these multifamily apartments or whatever they may be will have city sewer. That should not be a concern there. Now, as far as a TIA, would that be required when they, Jeremy?
A TIA has been under works for the last year,
Okay.
and they are still working on it.
Dr. Govachon,
What's a TIA?
that's why, that was my next thing. TIA is a transportation impact analysis. So this particular developer has to hire their company, one of our companies that we have on our list, and they have to do a traffic impact analysis to this. And that's partly to decide, do you need a traffic light on Halltown Road? Do you need a traffic light on Piney Green, et cetera, and other type of different things as far as reduction lanes, and so forth. But yes, so that will be in the process and so forth, and that will help deal with some of the concerns that I spoke to Ms. Govachon about as far as that. But again, all the council's being asked tonight is to zone this property. There's no site plans or anything of that nature, but I hope that addresses some of your concerns.
But it's an amendment, so that means this has been zoned before, right?
No, sir, this land is what I would call new land. It's coming in from the county. It's never been in the city before. It would have been subject to county zoning, you're correct. But when it comes into the city, we have to apply city zoning to it. And, yes.
And the map you're referring to is a county map that's being amended?
No, sir, we're talking about the city zoning map.
City zoning map being the one that's being amended?
Yes, sir, because once it comes into the city, it has to be amended to, I don't know what the county zoning is, their RS F7, maybe a RST1 or something like that, something totally different. So when it comes into the city and is annexed into the city, it has to be zoned in accordance with city zoning regulations, and that's what has been done here. And the first part up there, which was done many years ago, and I think it is platted, that is the first section up there that's been in the city a long time, it's called Patriot Park Phase 1. That is platted, that is zoned RSF7, and so it's not platted.
The subdivision, the preliminary subdivision is approved, they just haven't proceeded with platting because they
Okay,
haven't
excuse me, I used
commenced
the wrong term.
construction. They just received a renewal of approval this year.
Hope that.
I think all my questions were answered.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, go on. Close the public hearing, reconvene the regular council meeting. Council, you're being asked to consider the proposed request.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion. I recommend that we approve the zoning request, accepting the evaluations found within the staff report based on findings of facts A through J being found in the affirmative, that the zoning does advance the public interest, creating more development opportunities, and directing the staff to update the CAMA future land use map.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed. Now we're going to talk about.
Recess,
Oh, yeah,
Mayor.
okay. You want to take a recess? John, go ahead.
Well, I want the public to know that we're asking the council to take a recess and then to reconvene in rooms A and B for what we'll call the workshop presentation on those two last items tonight. Thank you.
All right, we'll stand recess.
Mayor and council, our first item that we're going to talk about, have a little discussion on is on our residency ordinance. Given, some of the challenges we have in recruiting these days, I just thought it'd be a good opportunity to just, bring the current ordinance on the residency requirements to council and just talk about it a little bit. Of course, we've had some residency requirements that go back to 1996. They've evolved, they can see in 96 it was had to do with fire department personnel having to live in the city. Well, that's since been changed and they have to live within 45 miles of the city. But we went through in the 2000s and then 2010 until 2018, making some adjustments. Right now, the current requirement basically says that all department directors, city manager, deputy assistant, city attorney, city clerk have to move within the city within 60 days of their appointment to those positions. There is a provision for a waiver if someone is currently working for the city, worked for the city for 5 years, and doesn't live in the city but gets promoted to one of those positions. They're allowed to remain where they currently live. If they move, they have to move into the city. And that's the policy itself has got another provision in there that talks about, gets very specific when it comes to a handful of positions. In other words, it basically allows an exception for some of your directors, but it's specific about the city manager, deputy assistant city manager, the city attorney, and specifically the public safety director and the public services director. And that those, it's kind of like the concept there is under all circumstances, they're gonna have to move into the city, if they're hired, externally, or if they don't live at their current location, haven't lived there for 5 years. But The other issue is it says 60 days, and that's a challenge too, you know, with housing market and that. So I just bring this up now. I mean, this could, you know, be a consideration. We're doing a recruiting now for a finance director. And we're not at a point where I'm ready to ask for anything to change on that. But also as you're going through the recruitment for the city manager, you know, in other words, 60 days may not be a reasonable period of time in that. So, you know, at this point, if council's got any thoughts, you know, about if we ought to consider some changes, you know, I'll take any input on that. But like I said, we don't have to take any action tonight, and I just wanted to put that out there at this time.
We always have thoughts, Mr. Massey, always. To me, there's a lot about this that's a little heavy-handed, especially given the employment climate that we are in now, when you are trying to fill the number of seats that we are trying to fill at various levels. That's a lot to ask of anyone. I personally think it's a little heavy-handed. Given, you know, your public safety director and city manager, there's a few folks that you may want to have a little closer to home at all times, but for a department director or some other positions, that just, you know, I mean, it's a free country, isn't it? You know, we're kind of stepping into some areas there I'm not comfortable with trying to manipulate and control personally. There's my thoughts.
I think I made my thoughts known to you. I think it's kind of archaic, the whole policy like that, but there are certain individuals that do need to be located in the city. One being the city manager, the police chief, fire chief, those people that have to respond, you know, very quickly to events. As far as the city attorney is concerned, I don't think you would need to have your city attorney respond to a major incident at 3 o'clock in the morning or within a certain amount of time. Do you, John?
That's a loaded question.
My wife would testify I'm answering emails at 2 a.m., but that's just her testimony.
Therein, though, it's electronic communication is adequate.
City attorney at times may be an interim city manager. And you go on, where the city manager
Well, if he
is.
was fulfilling that role, that would change.
Well, I mean, interim.
And then it seems like this has been swinging back and forth since I've been on the council with some of the, you know, appointments we made or decisions we made concerning department heads.
60 days isn't reasonable. Requiring the city limits is not reasonable. I agree with the term antiquated.
It's not realistic.
Time to bring it up to par.
And, you know, I just like to collect input, and that will,
We'd like to see the fire chief added to that list of the required. There are certain folks who need to be required to live in there, and the fire chief certainly needs to be named.
Bear in mind, even with your public safety leaders, you've got communities around here that don't require that. We have police chiefs and fire chiefs that live in Jacksonville that work in other communities. So we're setting a precedent that others aren't requiring. I'm not saying it should change, I'm just saying others aren't requiring that, and that's get back the employment as well.
I think it could be an impediment to hiring someone, like I say.
You know, as an alternative to that, you could have a time limit.
Time or miles.
Time or miles, user time, but certainly within I don't know what's reasonable, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, something along those lines.
I think 30 if if you really have to get here for a major emergency for some reason, that's adequate time to get anywhere. I mean, you get from Swansburg here, 30 minutes.
Part of the thinking on that is that whatever policies we do, we want the major department heads to be under the same requirements for all the other citizens, you know, so that they are part of the community. We want them to be part of the community. I'm a little concerned if we allow too far out. They're not going to be part of the community. We want them involved. We want them living. We want them to be active in the community. And I just think if we allow them too far out, I think it puts the community in a bad position.
The counter to that, maybe, and I'm not arguing, I'm just saying, the balance to that is that if they're in the city and they're working at that level of responsibility, they're probably putting in 40 to 60 hours a week. As it is here, they're already probably committed to some external events with their department. I mean, they're gonna be living here, working here most of the time. I think if it's a reasonable travel time, we're not sacrificing much. And I would hate to see someone who lives in Richlands that's an excellent candidate for the job not be offered the job or take the job because they don't want to sell their house and try to move in 60 days or 90 days or some other frequency. It kind of comes back to, you know, you can incentivize and you can offer, you can ask, you can wish, and you can hope. But if it's like this, then we limit ourselves and limit really quality candidates from being able to seek employment or advancement.
That's great.
And it might be like a city manager, like they might be coming from out of town somewhere, maybe they have kids somewhere else, they might have to, you know, adjust them, finish them out of the school year or whatnot. They might have to come down, live, maybe rent an apartment or something for a time period till they can adjust their family life to get them here. And we don't want them putting them under the gun where they're like, well, if you're gonna be so strict on this, maybe we're not gonna come here for that reason. You know what I mean? Give them a little bit more leeway because there's different things. I mean, you don't wanna uproot their kids as it is and more or less under a time. You know, and that could also have a financial impact too. They're trying to do it so quickly, they might not get what they want or overpay or whatever the case may be.
At this point, they don't have to rent your basement
Yeah, there you go.
or your garage.
So, got everybody's thoughts right now, and I appreciate your input in that. Now let's go on to the next topic, which hopefully.
You have a consensus?
Any discussion ideas?
We just wanted ideas.
We'll come back with some options.
Did you, before we move on to the next item, as far as response times, you mentioned that, right, Bob?
I did.
What's reasonable?
I think 30 minutes. I mean, you can get a lot of places in 30 minutes nowadays. I mean, especially the bypasses and whatnot.
I hesitate endorsing a time thing because I do think it's important that the essential, what I'm gonna call the core group of folks, I think they need to be invested in the community. I think their kids need to be playing Little League ball, playing rec basketball. I think they need to be on the receiving end of some of the policies and procedures that we as the council develop along with them to help govern Jacksonville. And I think if they're not experiencing what we're doing for the citizens, they don't really have a good feel for whether what we're doing is good ideas or bad ideas. I'd like to see a city manager get involved, or assistant city manager, or whoever department head get involved with Kiwanis or Rotary or whatever. If they're not living in the community, they're not invested in the community. And I think it's important that they become invested in the community.
I agree with you.
I can make an argument for some of the wards I am in that there are people living in the community that was not invested in those communities also. So what does that really mean?
I mean, I guess my point was, I was talking about, there's like the few people you're talking about that need to, I think those people should live, you know, close by. I meant more people, like more broad, is I guess where I was going with it, so.
Well, you know, the first exception that I remember was Miss Maid's finance director. We certainly had a very well qualified individual in-house, and she lived out, you know, out the city limits. In fact, she lived out of the county limits, but we did make an exception, and so there are positions that I think can reasonably do that, but I'm concerned that some, I think, need to be in the community.
I think a manager in your head, police and fire, definitely.
Perhaps come back with some draft options.
Yes, yep.
See how other municipalities have handled it possibly.
Yeah, we're obviously, you know, we don't need to get to a conclusion tonight. We've got another topic that we really want to spend some time on. So the next thing we're going to talk about is compensation. And I'm gonna ask Kimberly to come up here and bring whatever members of the team that she wants to be part of the discussion. You know, we're gonna, part of this presentation, we're really gonna get into some detail that we normally wouldn't get into. Because I think it's important for council to understand how our compensation system actually operates. Because there's questions sometimes, you know, that imply that we're just kind of grabbing things and just, you know, reacting to them. We've got a very sophisticated system that's pretty standard, you know, in the area of compensation. And I want council to get a feel for that. For those of you that were on the council in 2007, that's when this current system was implemented. Prior to that, you know, the city had gone through, that was the fourth sort of classification effort over time that the city had gone through, you know, and in 2007 found itself at a point where we had problems with compression, we had problems with, you know, competitive salaries and things like that. Well, some of our discussions we've been having recently, you know, are along the same lines, and it's kind of like, okay, before we get started on fixing it all, let's understand what our system is and then decide from there how we go to fix it all. So, Kimberly?
Thank you, I appreciate that, Mr. Massey. I want to take an opportunity to introduce you to the Human Resources team. We have Nancy, Crystal, James, Mary Dawn, Helen, and Tom. And these are the people that help lead all efforts for your human resources to include the compensation side. All the total rewards, benefits, safety, all health and wellness, recruitment, retention, selection. So I wanted them to come in and so you could put a face with some of the names that you hear. So this is our team. Thanks for coming in, guys. We appreciate you.
Kimberly, who does what in your department?
Well, that's a great question. We actually all do it all. I want to make sure everybody's trained so they can handle any specific part of human resources. But we do have people that specialize in certain areas because we're small and we can do that. So Tom is going to be talking to you about compensation. He's a compensation expert, and we're going to explain what that means. Helen manages all of our FMLA, our safety, and our retirements. Mary Dawn is all of the benefits, medical, dental, vision, anything to do with benefits. Every year we do the open enrollment piece, and if you that are on the benefits know that. James is in charge of all of our talent acquisition, all of our an analytical and statistical piece from an HR perspective. And then we have, from talent acquisition, 2 different avenues that we tackle, kind of recruitment and sourcing. So we've got Crystal that manages all of the public safety piece, and Nancy that handles all the public services piece. So our goal is that these folks, including me, don't sit in our offices every day. If you come and visit, you will see some of the offices don't have someone in it. You know, where are they? Well, they're in the department. So where Nancy and Crystal are working in their specific customer-facing departments, they'll actually be with those departments a lot of the time. So while he's over there, he works very closely with James and with Nancy, and then Mike Yanero and T. Tallman work very closely with Crystal and with James when it comes to their talent acquisition side.
So would they be classified as human resource generalists?
So they are. We have technicians, generalists, and managers here.
So what's the difference?
So our technicians are Crystal and Nancy, who at their level are focused only on the recruitment and selection piece. And then we have our generalists, which can touch all avenues. In case somebody's out, because we're a small team, we all have to be able to pitch in. We've got senior generalists, actually, which is Mary Dawn and Helen. And then we have 2 human resources managers of recent, went through a competitive promotion process, and that's Tom and James. And one of the things that we've done recently, and that was a great question, Councilman Jackson, is that this team is at every single interview. So when we talk about our excessive turnover, and we're going to go into that, and all the people we're trying to bring on board, one of us, all of us, are at every interview. And beyond that, in order to make sure that we're, keeping in touch with all of our employees and make sure that we understand what their needs are, we had a suggestion from one of our members, Nancy, which I loved, which is at 30 days, can we reach out and touch base with them? So every person that comes on board at 30 days, we call them and check with them, and see how things are going. And then at 60 days, we check in with their managers and make sure that they're providing all the services they need to, training and development for their new employee. And then at 90 days, we sit down and have a face-to-face with those new employees to make sure that we're providing all the services they need. Shall we start? Yes. Okay, thank you. Mayor Phillips and Council, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak really on one of the biggest challenges we are facing now and probably have faced since I've been here, since 2012. And that's employee compensation. And the reason this has come to the forefront, I think you're aware that we solicit feedback from our employees, the reasons that they leave through exit surveys and exit interviews. And until recently, those surveys have indicated career development as something that was important to them, and maybe they didn't feel that they were getting enough of that, or training and development. So every time we get this feedback, we try to wrap around services that make sense. So we started, as you know, a career development program in the entire organization. We started that in sanitation, then expanded it throughout the city of Jacksonville. We have a new learning development program that we've implemented thanks to some analysis that James has done. And we've implemented that integrated that with performance improvement plans and development plans. So when our employees leave and they tell us why they're leaving, we want to react. So first and foremost, those were the reasons that people were leaving. Now what we're seeing, the number one reason people are leaving is strictly because of compensation. And so I really want to thank you for understanding this as a priority, and really thank you for taking this on as a challenge and a priority for us. Today we're going to talk about just 5 things. I'm going to talk about our current employment challenges. I'm also going to talk about our compensation, kind of a history so you know where we've been, right? That's important so that we know where we need to go. And then Tom is going to come up and he's going to talk to you about the classification and pay system. And really this is a huge education opportunity because understanding compensation is not easy, and he is going to go into some detail. We're also going to talk about the results of the recently implemented compensation changes that you pushed forward for us last month, so thank you. And then after Tom's done with that, I'm going to come up and I'm going to talk to you about what the strategy would look like moving forward. So let's talk a little bit about some of our compensation challenges. Obviously, you've heard us talk about turnover. Turnover right now is at 30%, up from 9%. Now, the whole country's facing turnover increases. We all know that. But single-digit turnover has been consistent for years until just the last couple of years. We also have recruitment challenges. When I talk about turnover, I do also want to say, when people leave, they say constantly, and Mary Dawn does all of our exits for us, our exit interviews and our exit surveys, and they say, City of Jacksonville is a great place to work. I really don't want to leave. People are saying that. But because the compensation is so much better somewhere else, it's almost, they aren't given a choice. But interestingly enough, last week, we had several employees contact us and say, hey, I heard about the salary increases and I understand you're talking about this with council and it looks like everybody's on the right. Can we come back? We had 3 people request. I know, right? I'm very excited about that. Request to come back to work with us. So I'd say we're going in the right direction thanks to your work. So again, thank you.
What particular areas do they want to come back to?
T, do you want to comment on that? Inspire.
Yeah, I just had one come back, requisition to come back to the fire department. And I've had some interest from other people as well.
So that's good news. And we've heard that from people in public services too. So there are people that are calling and saying, we're interested in coming back. People do like working here. It is a great place to work. So the other piece of this really is the recruitment piece. In 2018, we had 7,500 applications a year for our positions that were open. In 2021, half of that. And we're still trending downward. Our policies say that we have to have 3 qualified candidates to interview. Our practice is a competitive process. We've had to ask for waivers from the city manager for the majority of the positions we filled recently because we don't have 3 qualified candidates, maybe only 2. So we've had to have waivers for that. Also, we add to that our no-shows. We've had a lot of no-shows for interviews. So all of these are the challenges that we're facing. We know right now we have 109 vacant positions. 46 of those are full-time, 53 are part-time or temp. Of the 46 full-time, 26 police fire, 7 public services. The others are one-offs like recreation, finance. Of course, you know there's one open in the CMO, city manager's office. So you can see that we do definitely have employment challenges. I'd like us to begin with the end in mind, and I don't know if any of you are Stephen Covey fans. I am, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but I really want to start with the end in mind because I'm going to ask you tonight to really think about adopting a compensation strategy. We need to make sure that our strategy is externally competitive. We need to focus on who is our competition and who we measure ourselves against, and we need to target some market within that comparative group. Maybe it's average salary. Maybe it's in the top quartile of the group. When we get to the end of the presentation, I'm going to suggest a direction we should go. But also, we have been maintaining our internal equity, and we want to continue to do that. So when I say begin with the end in mind, when we end at the end of this, after you've had full education from Tom, we're going to talk about what we need to do to be externally competitive and to be internally equitable. In 2000, and I know there's some history here, and many of you were here. I was not, but many of you here can fill me in on some of the details. But in 2007, we were contracted with a company called Springstead, who apparently was asked to come in and do a complete analysis of our organization for the same reasons we're here today: excessive turnover and minimal applicant pool. When they came in, as a matter of fact, when they came in 2007, the budgeting that in 2007 that was included in the budget, $700,000 in salary increases added to compression issues. $700,000 in 2007 was put in the budget to address compression issues. 6 months later, in 2008, an additional $480,000. If we annualize that, it was just under $800,000. In total, $1.5 million between 2007 and 2008, just to address employee pay to be competitive. And when they left, they said, look, we're going to address these issues. We're going to adjust compensation scale based on market analysis. You need to adjust your compression. You need to adjust your salary schedule and grades. Did all that. And you need to make sure employees progress their compensation through grade based on individual performance. Now, I will tell you, that happened for a couple of years but didn't continue, and I'll explain what I mean by that. When they left, they said, in order for this to be successful, so you're not back here again, you've got to do some things in regard to ongoing maintenance administration. You've got to do an annual market assessment. We do that, by the way. You've got to provide for salary and scale adjustments based on the market economic conditions, what we've referred to as COLA. And we've got to provide pay adjustments that recognize performance. This is where we dropped the ball. So when they left, everything got put in the right place, and Tom's going to show you that. Then what? Well, here is what. This is a 15-year wage adjustment history. And as you can see, in 2008, there was a 2.5% cost of living increase and a 3.0% employee improvement raise. In 2009, there was a 3.5 cost of living increase and a 3.5 employee improvement raise. Then in 2010, there was no increase. And there, at that point until now, it's basically been a cost of living increase. Now, let's talk about that for a second. Because cost of living increase is just that. It's to make sure you all know this, most of you in business, it's to make sure that you keep an employee whole, and it is successful in doing that. The employee stays whole, but it does not move them through the pay scale effectively. It does not reward performance. So we saw compensation as a priority in human resources, and we wanted to make sure that we focused on it. So much so that we wanted to certify someone on the team. At that time, Tom Sherwood was in charge of our compensation, our total rewards, and expressed an interest in being certified as a compensation specialist. So Tom is certified as a compensation expert with World at Work. And so Tom is going to come up and take you through a lot of detail, and I'm hoping you have a lot of questions. He's going to do an overview of our pay program. And so with that said, Tom, I'm going to bring you up if you don't mind.
Thank you, Kimberly. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to speak this evening. And my hopes are that by the end of my piece of this presentation is that you've gained a little bit of confidence in our process that we use to maintain the maintenance of our compensation program. So the biggest piece of our compensation program is that primarily is aligned with our mission and our vision and our city strategy. We work very hard to develop a workforce and maintain a workforce that supports our mission. And so what we use for that, the key components of our compensation strategy is the city's mission, vision, and goals. We also use the classification policy and procedures, the classification system itself, and the compensation scale, or the pay scale, which I'll show you here in a few minutes. Our compensation program has to be able to provide a mechanism in which it allows us to maintain internal equity. It gives us a tool that we can use to compare ourselves to the market in order to maintain external competitiveness. Is one of the key things that we're struggling with at this particular moment in time, exasperated by our economic conditions. And then the legal and defensible piece. There's a lot of laws and regulations that we have to follow in relation to the Fair Labor Standards Act and the Equal Pay Act. And this program guarantees that we're paying our employees in a manner which is consistent with the work that they perform for us and in compliance with the laws. A lot of the time, compensation can be kind of an emotional topic for employees. So it's nice to have a program and a strategy that's in place that's easily communicated. We have several tools that we use to communicate to our employees, and it's understandable. And then the last thing is that comparable to other organizations. And the primary thing there is being able to consistently measure yourself against your peer cohorts, or in our case, municipalities and towns throughout the state of North Carolina. And that's what that basically does for us. The nice thing that we have here is a very recognizable compensation program that many other municipalities use. And so that just adds to the consistency when we're comparing our structure to other structures and our pay to other pay. So the key considerations, primarily, that first bullet there, the individual performance experience, education, and certifications. I'd like you to look at that as that's an investment in your employees. And so what that means is, as an employee is hired, and oftentimes when we're recruiting, we don't find candidates that have significant municipal experience that's related to the type of work that they're going to be doing. We hire the best candidate, and they're oftentimes minimally qualified. And so our compensation structure provides the flexibility for us to hire folks who are minimally qualified. And I'll show you how that works in our pay structure in a few minutes here. But as that employee gains employment here, for the next 6 months, even a year, depending on the type of job that they're in, they require a great deal of supervision, a lot of instruction, maybe some formal training. And then as they gain traction, they start to emerge in their role and they start gaining more initiative. They start becoming more proficient and understanding their role. And at that point, they start to become more valuable to the city because now they are becoming a fully functional, fully trained, and qualified individual. And that leads us to our target compensation. And I'll show you in a few minutes here how our structure corresponds with the average pay on the market and why that is so important to us. Of course, we have to take into consideration our external environment, our economic environment, the budget, the funding. All of this plays a key role primarily because your employee compensation is your biggest bill at the end of the year. And then quite frankly, we cannot accomplish anything that we do here at the city without those folks. The economic conditions are no more apparent than they are today with 9.1 CPI. It was 8.3 in May. And who knows where it's going to end up at this point. But it is all affecting your employees' purchasing power. So now I'd like to kind of transition and just kind of give you an overview of how our system works and how we continue to apply our ongoing administration and maintenance for this plan. We use two approaches when we're evaluating positions. So like if a position comes available or becomes vacant, before we go into the recruitment process, we reevaluate that position, and sometimes we'll sit down with the department director. Maybe the department director wants to take that position in a different direction. We use the same system that Springstead used and the same methodology that Springstead used in 2007. And I'll show you that process here in a few minutes. The nice thing about this point factor approach, it's internally focused. It provides us a quantitative measurement on how to grade our positions and grade them within our positions hierarchy. And the simplest example that I can give you is this prevents a maintenance worker 1, for example, being graded higher than a crew leader, for example. And I'll show you, if you take a look at the first tab in your binders, I put these packets in front of you so that we can just have some discussion on some handouts that I've provided. That first tab is the grading sheet that we use. And those are the 9 graded attributes that we grade each position on. And that those numbers in the parentheses next to each of those attributes is a point range that you assign to that particular attribute based on what type of work they're doing, what the level of work is, and so on and so forth. But what this does for us is it leads to an overall score for each position. And the overall score is what we use to determine where it falls into the pay grade system. The other thing about that quantitative and this evaluation process, it eliminates as much subjectivity about the position as possible. And oftentimes when we're reevaluating a position where there's an incumbent because the position has actually changed, we're not evaluating the individual, we're evaluating the job that the individual performs. So then we'll go on to the second approach that we use, and this is just as important as that point factor approach. This is the market-based approach. Once we have gathered and we've completed this worksheet and we've got an idea where that position is going to land in our pay structure, we like to compare those results to the market. We often use what the League of Municipality salary survey that they publish every single year. It seems to be the one survey that I can find the most matches to our jobs and the most consistent results that gives us this consistent measurement that we're looking for. And so what we end up doing is we'll take that and we'll say this position seems like it's going to fit into a grade 5. We compare that to the market. If I can find a match in the market survey, for example, that position becomes a benchmark position. Right now, we have over 62 positions that are benchmarked based on the League of Municipality. When Springstead did their evaluation, there was only 35 benchmark positions. And so as we find good matches, we add that to our list and we use those as data points as we go through and evaluate our system. And so what generally is what we're looking for is what is the average pay in that salary survey? What is that position being paid on the market? And we match that average pay to our structure's midpoint. And I'll show you an example here in a minute. The idea is we're positioning our structure so that we're competitive at midpoint. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, we hire folks that are minimally qualified, and it wouldn't be good business to hire a person and pay them at market when they're not yet fully qualified. So what we end up doing is we set up a pay range, which I'll talk about in a second. This right here, I wanted to show you this slide because this illustrates how our process works. This is the methodology that Springstead used, and as I mentioned, this is what we use as well. And I'll just take a second here. That job analysis phase, that's what I'm talking about when we gather as much information about the position as we can. The incumbent or the manager and the supervisor, if we don't have an incumbent, complete what we call a position analysis questionnaire. We sit down with the employee, we'll sit down with the manager and the director to get a better sense of what the position is all about. All the while we're documenting and notating our findings. And we'll even, on most positions, we'll go and observe the position, we'll do some job shadowing. I've recently rode around with the fire marshal, rode around with Jason Larson a couple of times, just to get a sense of how this job is and what that person is actually dealing with in the execution of their duties. And that leads us into the documentation phase. Once we have all this information, we begin to document everything, and we'll build the job description, we'll identify what the key functions are, the essential functions of the position are, what are the tasks, and what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that the individual will have to know. Once we have all that built, we go into the two-factor approach where we assign the point factor with this worksheet, we compare it to the market, and then finally we assign it to the position classification system within an appropriate grade.
Yeah, a question.
Yes, sir.
Maybe I missed something, because you said initially when you hire somebody, they're minimally qualified, correct? Is that what you said?
Sometimes.
Okay, you said sometimes.
On the average, yes, sir.
Yeah, because I was wondering, because in some cases you're gonna have someone that might have been working within that business or that job.
That's right.
But not at a certain level, and they could be exceptional. Or you might have someone that's coming in from outside the organization that's proven that they're more than exceptional, so.
That's right.
And Tom's about to show you the pay grades and the spread, and it allows us flexibility to bring in someone based on their knowledge, skills, abilities, experience, education within that range. He'll explain that to you.
Yes, sir. Generally, what ends up happening is that they meet the minimum qualifications, and we end up hiring them within a reasonable. So what this leads you to, all of this documentation and all this evaluation, if you turn to that third, actually the next tab over, and you should be looking at this, the pay scale. Yeah, so 2. So what that does, if you notice, on the left-hand margin, there is a table. That is the point range that's associated with that grade. And then all those numbers next to it, that's the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum of each of those pay grades. And so what this does for us is it leads to that next tab, which is this schematic of every single position that we have here in the city. This is your job classification. And this is what I want to communicate, that the good news is this has already been built. A lot of the analysis that created this was done back in 2007, and over the last several years, 15 years, we have been administering this and maintaining it and growing it. And so I'll show you here towards the end of this presentation how this structure is still sound competitively. We just have to make some adjustments within our pay practices. And so I included this in here because I thought it'd be a good handout for you to look at, to actually see where all of our positions are by family, by grade, and within their specific departments. So the pay grade, as I talk, I feel like I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit, but that pay structure, that the minimum, midpoint, and the max, what that is doing for us is it's establishing the lower and the upper limit for the pay grades, as well as the midpoint based on market. It ensures that we're maintaining internal equity, and it's a great budgeting tool, and we often use this as a communication tool for the employees. All right, so we're getting close. This right here is just a basic generic diagram of what a pay grade looks like. And the main point that I want to make here is we match that midpoint to whatever the average pay on the market is. And then what we've ended up doing is we'll back off 30%, which establishes the minimum, and then we'll add 60% to that. And it gives us a 60% spread or range for each pay grade. What does that do for us? It gives us flexibility in hiring, and it gives us flexibility in recognizing performance, certifications, training, and experience. So now I've talked a lot about market, and I know just when we talked about this before, it's a kind of a hot topic. But what I wanted to demonstrate here, or just take some time to talk about the validity of the surveys when we're selecting surveys. Salary surveys they come from two sources. They're published surveys, or they're surveys that are conducted by third parties. A published survey is something like what the League of Municipalities publishes every year. There's a process involved. And some of the key factors that are involved in these surveys is primarily that job matching or the benchmarking. So when we participate in these surveys, we're reading job descriptions that they're looking for, and we're matching them to ours. When there's a match, we report those numbers that match only. If we don't have a match for those jobs, we don't report them. And this is what all the other municipalities and towns are doing. There's a statistical analysis that goes on. They create, they gather all the data. They even validate it. When we do our submissions at the end of the survey, oftentimes we'll get calls back for clarification or validation. And that just adds greater confidence in the process that they're conducting. The data that they're going to produce has gone through their due process. And so when they publish this, there's all kinds of data that comes. There's weighted salaries, there's the average salaries, the average hiring rates, the number of incumbents per position, the number of participants who reported in the survey. And the thing with the League of Municipality survey is that we have a large sampling of municipalities and towns all across the state of North Carolina. And it becomes less important in this aspect of region as it does to sample size. So when we're looking at salary surveys, the main general rule, the larger your sample, the more confidence that we have in the data that it's producing, and we're able to make a better business decision off of.
If I can.
Yes, sir.
Offer something. If our comparison with data with the League of Municipalities, if we zeroed in on that, and they are the benchmark positions, then why are we losing people?
That's a great question, sir. And I'll show you here in a few minutes how our pay structure is comparable to the market. And in other words, our benchmark positions, midpoints, match what the market is. And what we're lacking in the reason why we're not able to retain employees is because we're simply not moving them through the range. We've lost a component to our pay philosophy. We've applied a cost of living allowance to the employees, which essentially keeps them in the same relative position in which we've hired them.
In other words, we haven't made major adjustments.
No, sir.
On a comparable basis with the municipalities.
Yes, sir. What we've tried to do is keep them whole. And because of the pressure to keep our pay scale competitive, we have to move our pay scale occasionally. And that's really what our market analysis is all about, is just to determine, is our pay scale competitive? And then if it is, the only thing that's left to do is to make sure that our employees are paid consistent with our pay structure. And so it becomes an internally focused. Our structure is positioned right. Are we internally focused?
It almost sounds like with your statistic analysis, basically, it's more quantified in terms of if we're paying our employees a certain amount of money, then that's going to make them stay. But I also wonder, piggybacking on what Mr. Bittner says, is it more qualitative? The reason why I am staying. In other words, what is my affinity? Yes, I know I can make $100,000 doing this job, but in coming here to make $100,000, is that enough to keep me here? Am I happy? What is it about the city of Jacksonville that becomes my raison d'etre? Why am I really coming to work? Am I coming to work because I'm simply making six figures? Or am I coming to work because it fulfills me, it excites me? I get up every day with a zeal to come here in addition to making $100,000. So where I see you quantifying, crunching your numbers, I'm wondering about that qualitative aspect piece that might be missing. My job's great, but my supervisor is not.
All good points. Yes, ma'am.
But they're saying that at the beginning that most people on exit interviews like Jacksonville as a good place to work.
That's right.
So that belies what you're saying.
Not necessarily so.
I think so.
Well, no, it isn't, because
Not necessarily so.
there's more than just the exit interviews, I'll just say that.
Well, it would be case by case,
Right,
and
case by case.
that's never gonna change, but we need the quantitative analysis.
Right.
Sure you
Because
do.
it takes the mystery meat out of the structure of the scale and the process. What's missing, we haven't had a raise since 2010,
Right, that's huge.
and we haven't had performance-based incentivizing,
Right.
so
Just
that's
keep
part
it
of the value add. If
Yeah.
I'm appreciated and I'm rewarded for my education, my efforts, and my performance, then that makes me feel a whole lot better about what I'm making, whether it's, because a lot of those jobs aren't no six-figure jobs.
Because
But I'll still feel good about what I'm doing because I have a competitive pay and I'm being rewarded for the effort I put in, the education I've obtained, certifications I maintain, the training there's a lot that goes into caring about your job and the team.
My exit interview may be safe because I need a reference. So I'm playing it safe to exit. I'm
I guess
just,
we just gotta look at
No,
measuring.
and you're
measuring
absolutely
tools.
right.
Yeah.
What we're getting
Yeah.
largely is they are concerned about pay, and as Kimberly said earlier, they like their job here. They hate leaving here. I feel like that culture and that element does exist here at the city. And as a general rule in human resources, what we have found, most folks don't leave their job for pay, as Dr. Washington is saying. They leave for other reasons. But you get to a point where the pay just isn't enough.
So
It
I
just
think there's
isn't
a lot of
enough.
things
So-
we need to look at. To your point, Dr. Washington, I do think that there's other things. Our goal tonight is to focus on what you requested from us, which was the compensation piece. Agreed, this is not a silver bullet. It's one piece of the puzzle,
What
absolutely.
you're saying by not incorporating other things besides those annual cost of living increases, they're not putting the employee at any advantage.
No, sir.
Okay.
So that's right, sir. So what the idea is that eventually, as an employee gains experience and education and they become more valuable, the idea is they're going to be paid at midpoint. And I'll give you a perfect example. I have 100 of them, but we had a plant operator position, and we had difficulty filling that position, and we ended up creating a plant operator trainee because we just couldn't find applicants that had the actual certification that wanted to come here. So we hire them as a trainee, we send them to school, we pay for it, we send them to school, we train them, we give them the OJT. They get certified, we promote them to plant operator 1. Now they're gaining more experience, we're sending them to some more training, and they get to a point where now they're extremely marketable. And who swoops them up? The base does, because they have the certifications that they're looking for and the experience. So here we are, we're training these people, we're getting them certified, we're showing them that we value them as an individual and employee because we're going to invest in your time, we're going to invest in your education, and then they get to a certain point where our pay just isn't keeping up. At some point, when they get these certifications and now they're certified, they need to be pushing closer to that midpoint. Now, not all your employees are going to be on midpoint. Some will be below and some will be above. But that's
Why don't you go explain your comparison here?
okay. So if you take a look at this, I thought that this would be a good analysis. This is an example of how we compare our employees' actual pay, our pay structure, and compared to the market. That top bar represents the pay range. That's your 60% spread. The second bar down is your midpoint, which is the middle point of our pay range. And that is the part where we're trying to match what the average pay on the market is. And that third bar is what that is, the NCLM average pay. As a general rule, not all of these midpoints are going to be right on what the market is. They're going to be 5% below, 5% above, because there's a process once you get it matched. And then that bottom bar is the average pay of our actual employees that we have serving with us right now, and they're 14% into that pay range. Now, is that a bad thing or is that a good thing? It depends. It depends on how long they've been here. It depends on how much training and education they have and how their performance is. In this instance, those are 2 admin 1s. They've been with the city on average 2 years, and they're currently emerging into their role. So they might be positioned right. But eventually, as we get into this and they've stayed with us a little bit longer, the idea is that we're paying them closer to that midpoint.
See, right now, the COLA only gets them partway into the range. It doesn't acknowledge that additional experience, or any certification or that. And that's the piece that we talk about, that we sort of dropped off in our overall annual compensation adjustment.
Well, in employment, COLA by definition is, a revenue neutral proposition. So you can still afford eggs and you can still afford milk, but you're not making more money, in essence, in your real life. In the checkbook, there's not more money because you've got an increase to what your pay is based on inflation, but you still have to deal with the inflation. So it's literally almost a revenue neutral proposition in most cases.
You're pushing the market midpoint out further. So am I understanding that correctly?
My question is, if we know all this, why aren't we fixing it? Like, why are we in this hole?
How did we get here? Right.
We've been here for years, and I'm just getting started. I've only been here a year, and this is crazy. And it's crazy that we don't talk about this every year. I mean, this is the first I've ever heard about this, being in this seat. I mean, and we should have known this. I mean, luckily, Cindy being new, she gets a hit right out of the bat. I mean, I've been here for a little over a year, and this is the first I've ever heard about it.
Yes, sir.
And I mean, I think it needs to be brought where we're discussing this yearly is, a huge part of our budget. I mean, it needs to be brought up a lot more.
That's actually going to be the recommendation moving forward. We wanted to, as we've been instructed, to educate so that you understood and get some credibility in the program because it works. What we do is good and it works. It's just, the bottom line is, the program works, we're not funding it.
Do department heads have the authority with the city manager to adjust people toward or above the bid range?
It's right now, it's very restrictive right
Pardon?
now. It's very restrictive.
Restrictive.
Yes, sir. And so,
Okay.
and many times when
I
we've
understand.
made reclassifications or salary adjustments, we've used salary lag, basically money from vacant positions to fund.
If a
salary
department head
increases.
wants a position to be looked at because they don't think it's paid at market, they ask us to do an assessment. So there are assessments done every week, all year long, on all positions regularly because department heads are often asking for things to be reviewed.
Go ahead.
We need to.
I was about to say, and this is no disrespect to our city manager or in the interim city manager. Sometimes to get to the question, to get to the answer that you're really looking for, sometimes you have to go to the source. And the source meaning the workers. And with that being said, I don't ever recall ever having like closed session meetings with our department director to specifically talk about his or her department and what the workers are saying. For example, let me give you an example. Say for example, I'm working in the parks and I'm a planner. No, say I work for sanitation. I'm picking up trash. But in being a sanitation technician, I also know how to speak Spanish fluently. And probably, let's say 15 to 20% of the city business is that you need someone to be able to translate, to be able to interact with customers coming in. But because I'm a sanitation worker, and when I filled out my application, I put down not much qualification to be a sanitation worker, but me being fluent in Spanish was either overlooked or I didn't put it there. But I now have a skill set that the city can utilize. Or I have that skill set, but the city will not compensate me for it. So I'm just wondering, is further conversations with those department heads warranted to give us more of an insight of how do we mitigate what's going on so we can stop this hemorrhaging? So we're not just losing department heads, but, you know, a sanitation worker being fluent, that's an asset skill to be bilingual or even trilingual at best. But someone may not think twice to look at that worker because your job is to just be a sanitation worker, and that's all we see, and that's all we're going to utilize. Because I'm willing to bet you my next paycheck from Uncle Sam, which I don't have a problem doing, you probably have 10 to 15% of your workforce that can actually do or enforce another skill set that you're probably not even capitalizing on.
I was going to ask a question on top of that. How often do you have a person going up from one position to another department based on those type of skill sets? Or do we have that? How frequent? Or
So we do a lot of internal promotions, And we do recognize when we do know that someone is bilingual, for example, Nancy in our department is, and we do have an opportunity to do performance award, but it's not, to your point, part of their base salary as paying for value. We don't have that. We do have internal promotions regularly.
And I'm talking about from department, maybe going from one department, because it's recognized that they can do other things.
Oh, yes. As a matter of
based
fact,
on
I've got a
other
great
skills.
example of that. We actually went to sanitation and had T and his team because we were in need of firefighters, and we were trying to increase, if you remember several years ago, we were trying to increase our diversity in the fire department. So we went to the sanitation streets departments and we talked to them about anybody there that might be interested. We said, let's invest in our current employees. Anyone that might be interested in a career in fire and rescue. So we brought over some people to talk about a career. I think we did it in police too. Did we not? And to gather those people that might be interested. I think we did get, I would like to say a handful. I think we got 2 people that were able to transfer to those roles. But we do have people that move in different roles throughout public services, in human resources. And Crystal, as you know, came in from the city manager's office. So we do have people that request transfers. Those transfers are a competitive process. They do interview for those. But that happens pretty regularly. I don't have the date in front of me to tell you exactly, but I can certainly find out.
We had the best example, William from the city garage as mechanic going to the waste treatment as the manager of the operation, right?
Yeah, there's opportunities, and we can talk about other stuff. Let's get focused back on just the survey, the lead survey, and get to a point where we can agree that we want to use certain information to work on this piece of the salaries, right? And also look at where we stand with some of the adjustments we made so far in that.
You asked us to bring back what the decisions you made and the salaries, what it did. Did it move? So we'd like to get to those slides too.
Good.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
So moving right along, this is another example.
Maintenance one.
We'll speed through these a little bit, but this is a maintenance worker 1. They're in public services, they're in parks. Again, same thing. The top bar is the full range of the position. That next one, the midpoint, that is the midpoint of the range, compared to the third bar, which is the League of Municipalities average pay. And again, on this instance, we're lagging by 3%. Which isn't out of the norm, and it's not too terribly bad. And then our maintenance workers as a whole across the city are sitting at about 22% in the range. And based on their years of service on average, that's generally okay for now, but we'll have to eventually get them closer to the midpoint. They're, by the way, currently 18% below market average. I thought it would be interesting to show this slide since we've made some significant increases to the police officer. So the police officer 1 compared to the League of Municipalities. Now, the pay range does not represent the step plan, but it represents pay grade 13, which is where the police officers are in. And I wanted to show you how that compares to the midpoint as well as the League of Municipalities average. And so we've done a $5,500 increase for the step. And on average, it's raised the police officer 1 to 13% into grade. And they're still 16% below what the market is paying. So that kind of leads us into the next topic, which is what is the impact of the 6% COLA and the $5,500 salary increase for the step? It was implemented on July 2nd. We did the 6% COLA for all employees that are eligible and not on a step. We applied the $5,500 to every step for police officers and telecommunicators. We also removed the fire department from their step plan, applied a 6% COLA to them, and then made some additional internal equity adjustments so that they're equitable within the public safety department. And we've got them closer to some competitive pay, which I'll show you here right now. And so this table right here you'll notice it's a firefighter 1, engineer lieutenant, and a battalion chief. There's other positions, but those 4 positions are solid benchmark matches that we have on the salary survey. The first column is the average salary on the market. That second column is where they were before we applied the changes, and that last column is where they are currently sitting after all the adjustments. And so you'll see they're not quite average pay, but they are really close right now. We've been able to make some really good movement with the fire department, but the work is still.
And with that $500,000 salary adjustment money that was in the budget, over $300,000 of it,
yes, sir,
was what went to enable those adjustments.
Yep. This is the impacts on the police department. Same concept. The first column is average. That's where they were, and the last column is where they've landed.
And the thing about it is, when we talk about the league's salary, that's the salary that was in the survey from November of '21. Okay, so we're comparing our today's salary to what the league members reported in the survey last fall.
So general impact, or impact for general employees. This is a sample of some public services positions. Again, these are benchmark positions, but this one's a little different. I wanted to show you a comparison of average pay midpoint as it compares to the market. And so that first column is what the average pay for each of those benchmark positions are on the League of Municipalities. The second column is where they are now after the 6% COLA. And then that last column is that position's midpoint as it compares to the market.
In our salary scale, you know.
So you can see right here exactly what you brought up earlier. The midpoint, which is market, compares very well, for the most part, to North Carolina League of Municipalities' average salary.
And the last one, admin.
But,
Yes, sir.
but, go back.
Okay.
We're yes, you need benchmark positions, and I think y'all are on the right track using the leagues, but you just mentioned that, hey, we train them and the base scoops them up. So do you have any information on what's the base paying? Those are really, for the plant operators, that's our real competition for the plant operators, not the rest of the Asheville.
That's a great point, sir. The idea is, what we're actually using this for is we're not in a race with necessarily the base. There's no way that we can compete with them. The idea is that we're getting some valid compensation data that we can compare to. So you can do that. We can pulse regional areas.
I don't have a problem with you doing your structure, but in situations where we're losing police officer, fire departments, and water and sewer, it's to the base primarily, and the other also county. But really, that's I'm just curious how that plays into some of y'all's compensation decisions.
If you remember the figures that we looked at before, we were losing in pay. Like we're real competitive here. Obviously, the base is going to be its own beast, but we were below Kinston and some really small communities prior to the adjustments that were made. So we've come a long way in terms of leveling that playing field.
And just to talk about my point a little bit, if you notice the average pay for a police officer one from the League of Municipalities, that's $51,003. If we were paying at midpoint, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. We wouldn't be losing people to the county, and they wouldn't be going to the base. So that's the purpose of, the data. If we can just consistently measure ourselves and just focus on that. The county, the base, they can do what they want, but we're going to follow, a consistent market average.
And then that enables you to work on some of the other things like the quality of life, the work environment, things like that.
And then that's just a look at an administrative assistant. I thought that that was a good position to show you folks. This is a job family, what we call the admin 1, 2, and 3. And we're pretty proud of this because if you notice, the midpoints are almost dead on what the average salary is on the market. That's because we've recently, last year, we finished a project where we reevaluated the admin positions, and that's where we've ended up. So I wanted to show you that to just give you an example of our ongoing administrative and maintenance is working on the structural side. And then that concludes my my portion of the presentation. The last thing I'll leave you with is the last tab. I've provided you the executive summary that Springstead left us when they did this structure in 2007. I just feel like it's very informative. It gives you a broad scope of what we've just talked about and how some of the ongoing administration and stuff like that works.
You have to recognize that the municipal league figures are about a year behind the fiscal period.
Right.
It was in November of 21, so you have to figure they adjusted theirs along with their budget in June.
That's right. So we're still chasing.
And luckily, under normal conditions, sir, the market, it just doesn't shift, that dramatically where you need to do quarterly adjustments. We just don't work in an industry like that. We're very lucky. But it is highlighted right now, and it is volatile, even in our industry right now within a municipality. So we would expect in November that those numbers will be a lot different.
So when are you going to tell us what it's going to take to reach
So,
the league average?
So first I need you to agree on something because we've tried this before. And so, one of the things I know is if you aim at nothing, you will hit it every time. And we don't have anything to aim at. So we're here asking you to give us the parameters to work in. So we want to adopt a compensation strategy. We want to propose something and we want you to adopt that strategy. And here's why we want you to adopt the strategy. So every year we can come before you as many times as you want, but certainly before budget and say, based on your strategy, we are lagging, we are leading, or we are right at it. And our market data says, because we're members of World at Work, and they will do a best guess, and I've known them to be right 100% of the time. They can tell us what our market is moving. So we can come back to you, for example, and say, we're lagging 2%. So we know we have to catch 2%. Our data is showing our market's moving 5%. I'm making up these numbers. So if you want to meet your adopted strategy, and we're going to talk about what that looks like, you need 5%. And it's kind of an oversimplified option, but we need you to adopt a strategy that allows us to continue to be internally equitable. That means we want to continue to do our ongoing assessment of our employee pay that Tom told you about, how we assess pay, how we mark, how we want to continue to do that because it works. We also want to provide for salary and scale adjustments based on market and economic conditions. Being members of World at Work helps us analyze that data regularly. And we want to provide pay adjustments that recognize individual performance, experience, education, certification. That's pretty much a given. Here's where I say if we aim at nothing, we will hit it every time. I need a target. We are asking that we look at a peer cohort with NCLM based on everything you've seen here, and that we do an annual assessment of that group, which we do, and then we have a target. And so you say to me, what would that target look like? Is the target that you want to pay at the average of that peer cohort? Because then we can do all the data analysis and come back and tell you on all the anchor positions, which you heard we've got 62, where we sit. Or do you want to pay in the top quartile or the lower quartile? You have to tell us where, one, can we have an adopted strategy that we agree on who we're going to compare ourselves to? And then based on that, can you tell us where you want to target that group? I need those two things. Now, to your points, and very good ones, there are some unique contributor positions. And I agree, if you allow me to do this, that those unique positions that we do get stolen from the base, that we can have some temperature tests, that we can bring that in as an outlier and explain why we might need to do something a little different right here. But for the most part, we would like to adopt a strategy that allows us to utilize North Carolina municipalities, not one-offs, not phone call salaries, but real data, and then bring that back to you on what you choose the target to be. And we're suggesting the target be average salary.
See, one of the things, some of the information that we looked at was in, when we were looking at salary increases, was not out of the league's data. It was done with phone calls and that. And the problem with that is, who was calling, who was asking, what position were you comparing the salary to? Tom's discussion about the methodology that the league follows is you have some standardization. So when you're comparing numbers, you have a confidence that you have certain benchmark positions and you have a better feeling of comparability in that. And so that's why we're talking about, let's use something that we agree on. The average numbers from the league that Tom showed in his charts were for all the communities in the 25,000 to 99,000 population range, So you can just take that group, for example, or you could go within that group and identify communities. But the important thing is use the numbers that were connected through the league's methodology. Whether you use that average group of 25,000 to 99,000, or whether you zero in on some more specific communities.
We feel like that's a good group because it matches us, and we're not trying to compare to Wilmington and Raleigh and Cary and Fayetteville, these really huge cities within the state of North Carolina. In that group, we're actually the third largest in that group. So we feel like it's a good measure. It gets us closer.
And we don't have to actually decide that right this minute. In other words, if we want to look a little bit more about what would we compare ourselves, but our big thing is let's focus on the league salary survey information, and then the whole business of the target average salary. That's another thing. Well, we can go pull some information, we can look, and we can see, well, I don't know if I can stretch to the average right this minute. Maybe I need to target 10% below the average to start with, whatever it is. But that's additional discussion we can have.
We can certainly target the average and put together a plan to get there.
But again, this is, we wanted to share this, and that it's kind of like we just didn't do it that way before, but this is an opportunity to basically change the way we've gone about managing it, and hopefully head in a direction that we're all sort of more comfortable with.
I would also like to see for the internal process to be able to have the department directors to talk to council about what's going on in their department and what unique stories those particular workers are confining with their department directors in terms of why are they leaving. I would like to see that.
Just out of curiosity, I'm over here spitballing these things here. When you're making a comparison of different cities, different municipalities, one of the things that keeps popping in my mind is comparing one tax base against another. That's one of the problems we've had. We've had some great plans for, you and I talked about this. We got a great plan already in place, but the problem is we just haven't been able to fund it. How are we going to take the steps to fund this thing once we find a good way or a way to do this?
Unfortunately, that's the difficult decision you will have to make, because we can provide you the data that will show you how we can be, with all things equal, meaning the employees are happy, they love their jobs, we're supporting them in their career development, all those things we want to do well. what is the salary that meets at least a competitive pay so that we don't lose them for that reason? And that's what we want to provide to you. We want to be able to come to you with that data, have you look at it and say, hey, if we're comparing ourselves to NCLM as a data point to get all of our stuff, and you're saying that we need to move to the average salary, and in order to do that, we need to do this, this, and this, you know, I don't have the answer for where the funding would cover, because the bottom line is, sir, we know the plan is, the good news, there's good news here, is that we have a structure, some organizations do not. We have a plan that works. You saw your midpoints are set appropriately for market. You saw that. The problem is we haven't funded it enough to move the people closer to the market, which is the midpoint. We would like to be able to show you that data so that you can decide what your next steps are. But in order to do that, I need to know what to bring to you. If you say, go ahead, use the NCLM data, bring back to us the average salary and show us where we need to make adjustments and what that will cost.
What that will cost, right?
Well, we've done some
That's what we gotta
preliminary
do.
work.
That's what we gotta do.
Do you have an idea of a number?
Wait,
Let's not throw spitballs out the wall yet. But
I don't think you
we've
want
talked.
I don't think you want to swag that.
I don't want to
down.
skin it, scare. We actually, we don't need to swag. We've looked at the data, but we don't want, it wouldn't be fair unless you all adopt that strategy and allow us to do some more work on it before we come back, but.
That's the other internal
We're happy to bring
piece of
that
our
to you.
analysis. Involves all the employees. There's a little bit of work to do to get an exact number. And for it to be accurate and actually impact what we're looking for.
Well, one problem is you get this in place, and if it's not maintained, then you're going to fall right back in. This Springstead study was done in 2007. We cherry picked this to death, and here we are, sitting here, what, how many years later? 15 years later?
Well, you can look at the historical chart I showed you and see where it started moving downward. And also, it wouldn't, so we can say on average, I'm making this number up, we're 6 or 10% below the average salaries for NCLM. We need a 6 or 10% raise. That's not necessarily correct, because we have to go in, Tom showed you that line. We have to go in and look at each of those different components. So we have recently done, as you know, and you have funded some adjustments. So we've recently done adjustments to some groups of people within the city that might not be at the same level of necessary funding as other groups. So we have to kind of go in and pull that together against that data if you agree to do that, so that we can come back to you with what we think it would cost.
Guys, we don't have any choice. They need to provide that information to us based on what she's suggesting right there. Now, funding that's our wrestle. That's our wrestle. But we need the information. We've not been getting it, and we need it starting now. So I think we go with it, and we'll wrestle with the financial implications when they come back.
I agree with that.
It's just
What's
necessary.
the timetable for coming back?
When's your next meeting?
Be careful, the 3rd of August.
I was going to say 5 minutes.
I'm free tomorrow.
Well, good, because we've got some analytical work we need your help with. Once you adopt the strategy to give us who do you want us to compare ourselves to and what is the target, we can do that pretty quickly.
Mr. Mayor, do you need a motion? I make a motion that we adopt the NCLM peer group strategy for our data analysis for comparison, and that we give our HR department a midpoint average goal so that they can come back to us with the data of what it will take to accomplish that and how long till we get there.
Okay, got a second?
Second.
Discussion?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
I know we start with that, because all of this is just bubbling up in my head right now. If we figure out there might be another area, I know you're starting off with the peer cohort target average salary. That's just something else we can do later, correct?
We can add it in. This needs to be the foundation, the basis of what we do, and then we can look. So for example, we can say, okay, we know we're losing the people from the water plant to the base. What is it that they're paying? Do we need to look at that as a data point for those particular groups? Does that answer your question?
And not to downplay the market analysis, But again, we're reusing this market analysis to make small rudder adjustments on our pay structure. It's already established. And we're just trying to make sure that our structure maintains where its current position is in the market. And you've already saw, we've already done a pretty good job of doing that over the years. Our structure, again, is sitting right about where we need to be market-wise. And so you're talking about small rudder adjustments. The point is providing a consistent measurement.
What do you think, sir?
Well, I know it's gonna take a while to do it, and I'm also concerned about what we're losing along the way, because, you know, we have had adjustments with fire, we've had adjustments with the police, but we still have a lot of other areas that we haven't dealt with. And just one day, you know, I was driving around Walmart, and I was asking the young lady, I was like, because all the lights were out in the parking lot, and I asked her, have you spoke with your manager about this? And they started talking to me and realized, they said, Brian, and then they went along and started telling me she was an employee, been working for 10 years. One of her subordinates had got a job to move to get paid more than she was somewhere else. So it's like, how are we gonna keep on, you know, we still got stuff we gotta deal with right now. And when do, you know, that's the reality. And you can't pay for experience, that's another thing.
Yeah.
The good news is there's hope. And the employees see that. And we, as
You're all watching tonight.
at the end of
Sure.
last year, we made some pretty good movements for public services. We did a project for them, and that kind of slowed it down. I think we've increased a few applications in some of those areas. And then the 6% COLA helped. And as Kimberly mentioned earlier, folks are recognizing that. In the fire department, there's some folks that are trying to come back.
I would say
So-
that we can give, and Ron's not gonna like me saying this, we would like to take a stab at being able to provide you something by August 3rd. And if we can't make that date, because I hear what you're saying, and I understand your concern, we do not want to drag this on any further. So I think we can do something by then, but please be patient with me if you hear right before that we need another week or two. But why don't we shoot for that?
This is the necessary step one, either way.
I get it. And all our employees out there, we want you to stay here, but I get it. I get what their position is.
Yeah, it's hard.
Any other discussion? All right.
I'm a little concerned about the motion. You're phrasing it, and I don't think you mean it that way, that it's an either or. We use them.
No, both. Use the North Carolina League of Municipalities for standard of measurement.
Right.
And the midpoint is our goal, the average.
And if that turns out to be too costly for us, we need the variations to go up or down.
Well, we won't know that.
More a matter of time, I think. If that's where we want to get, that's where we want to get. It's just, is it going to take 2 years or 4 years or 6 years to
Or
accomplish
phase
it?
in
Or yeah.
Okay, by that.
We need data. We've not had data. We need data. And I said, we'll wrestle with the financial implications at another. You're just gonna have to write a big check, Terry.
Rich on
All right, so Ms. Edwards has a motion. It's been seconded. Any other discussion? All right, so all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
One
Any
more
other
thing.
business?
One more thing I want to run by you before we go, this is quick, is, you know, Northeast Creek, the boardwalk is in terrible shape. Earlier this year, we applied for funding from Emergency Management Disaster Relief and Mitigation Fund. We asked for $2.5 million to basically replace the boardwalk and do some living shoreline, establish a living shoreline in the area of Northeast Creek. We weren't successful in that grant, but there is another opportunity through the North Carolina Land and Water Trust to submit a grant application, and what I'm asking for council approval to go ahead and resubmit this request for $2.5 million to basically try and get funding to do that work.
Yeah.
Yep.
John, weren't you gonna bring up something about property?
Yes, sir, I had my hand raised.
Oh.
I have a report, Dr. Washington. What I was gonna ask, you have the Williamsburg recreation land. This is just right here. It's 16.99 acres. In that land, you have a water well, which takes up about an acre, plus you've got a water line that goes across it like that. Presently, we have a written offer for the tax value of $169,900. But being consistent, which I think you always should, and being trustees of the people's property as well as the money, I would ask that you authorize me, and I've got a quote from someone, our normal person who does MAI appraisers, a relative has made this offer. So I would go to another appraiser who I've used before with the land application site out of Wilmington for $2,500 and could have a turnaround in 4 to 5 weeks, knowing about the well site and knowing about the relocation and so forth. But I'd like to get your authorization through a consensus to get that appraisal done. So you'll have that as information, and the person who's making the offer would have it also.
Okay, is there a consensus on that? Everybody good?
Good. $24.99.
We can have it.
We have a consensus.
Thank you, appreciate it. That's all. Thank you.
I want to circle back to that grant. You know, that Northeast Creek Boardwalk, I just feel like we're throwing good money after bad if we continue. We're going to continue to have storms. We're going to continue to have issues. I mean, it's nice that a grant would pay for it, but just a thought that, is it something we need? Is it something that is being used? Is it a wise use of our resources and time to continue to try to fix something that's going to get broken again probably fairly soon? Just throwing that out.
Is that boat ramp being used much now?
It is.
I know we
Yeah, the
rebuilt
boat
that.
ramp's in good shape. I mean, we did the bulkheads there and that. And now, of course, the living shoreline around the edge of it. Of course, the ramp or the boardwalk there, you know, had some construction issues and when it was built, but it would not be put in the same location. You know, it'd be shortened. But,
You know, if somebody else wants to pay for it, I'm okay with that. I know we assume the responsibility of maintenance, and I'm just wondering, you know, here we are. We know that we don't have enough money to take care of what we need to do. Is this something that we need to do?
like I said, we can apply and see. We don't have to accept it.
Part F money be used on that?
Sir?
Part F money?
No, not that. We wouldn't be able to get that much out of part of, but probably because of the coastal nature and that, you end up going after different funding than the part of. I don't think we'd see.
How about the Clean Water Fund?
Well, this is something like it. I don't know, you know, how they describe, I don't know which one, but it's North Carolina Trust Water and
We had that boardwalk redone not that long ago.
at Northeast Creek.
7 years ago.
Well, we did the most recent ones were basically Sturgeon City.
Okay.
That's a boardwalk that it's North Carolina Land and Water Trust.
I guess how often do you have to do these? On the average, are you seeing that you have to do these boardwalks?
It's a nice to have, it's not a need. We got needs that we're not sure we can afford to even fund, so.
We had to get the opinion of the Recreation Advisory Commission.
Well, like you said, if somebody else wants to pay the bill for it, that's great.
But just remember, we're still responsible for the maintenance and upkeep, and, you know. But I'm okay, I'm just throwing that out, guys. I'm not saying I'm against it, I'm just saying there's something to think about.
Can you come back with some information about the use of that boardwalk and get some
But of
photographs?
course, it's not really usable right now because of its condition. And we really have, you know, restricted people from going out on it.
But in the past,
But our people can go out there.
It's been a long time since it's been in this shape, kind of thing. The application, unfortunately, needs to be in before the end of July. Yeah.
Do or die on the funds.
Yeah, it actually closes next week.
We don't have to accept it.
Yep.
That's right.
Go ahead and go.
Apply.
Apply and then.
They can just
Wanna do it, don't accept it.
other grants out there.
Apply and then
evaluate.
Okay, give it a try. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the information tonight.
Yes.
That was-
Thank you.
Yeah.
For all the homework.
Big
that
start, yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Good job.
We appreciate it.
I guess we need to do reports.
Nope, everybody has me.
No report.
Oh, I got a report. Don't forget, that we don't have another meeting before then, but on August 2nd, Tuesday, August 2nd, we do have National Night Out downtown. We're gonna do it downtown this year, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Riverwalk Park.
It's not gonna be hot this year either.
I'm not gonna stick my foot in that.
We're gonna try to cool it all there.
It's shorts this time.
Anyway, it's a good time it's a good family time, so just put that out there. All right, motion to adjourn.
Moved.
All in favor?
Uh,